Yar har har and fiddly dee, we have online piracy making a comeback. That's the video that we will be watching today. And YouTube, if you liked my weird intro or just me as a person, consider throwing a like, a comment, and maybe even subscribing, because it costs you little and it helps me greatly, and I appreciate you. Yee! Enjoy the video.
The 2010s were the golden age of piracy. BitTorrent accounted for a third of all internet traffic. LimeWire had more monthly users than Facebook, and the Pirate Bay was the only video store in town where you were sure to find what you were looking for. Hypothetically, of course. The world was slowly switching from physical to digital media, and even people who weren't particularly tech-savvy realized that digital goods could be replaced endlessly with practically zero marginal cost. At its peak, 95% of all music downloads were pirated because it had become cheaper and, above all else, an easier way to fill up large digital libraries that were being made possible by cheap digital storage. But then, it just stopped. Since 2012, the internet has gotten faster, storage has gotten cheaper, and people have become more comfortable with computers, which should have just accelerated a growth trend. But it didn't. Since 2015, peer-to-peer file sharing has collapsed in popularity, and you might think you already know why. Streaming services like Spotify and Netflix were just a better, easier, and safer way to access content.
That is also true. I will definitely say, like, a lot of people in the US, they're very shocked about piracy in general. They're like, oh my god, you pirated? Or like, oh, how would you? How? You know, like being super like clueless on how exactly they're supposed to like access anything. And a lot of people nowadays are still going like, I don't know where to find X or Y. And I'm like, huh. Is that knowledge so ancient? You wouldn't download a car? No, only RAM. I only download RAM. Outside of the ECU somewhat. That's crazy to me. I mean, perhaps it's because the fact that they have an easier time, right? Like, they do have a lot of easy options. My country, for example, we don't have access to a lot of shows. We don't have access to a lot of things that a lot of other people have. Legally. Like, we have to VPN. That's the unfortunate reality of it. So, we don't have the convenient factor, I guess.
And now, as these services have become markedly worse and simultaneously more expensive, piracy is making a comeback. It seems pretty simple, right? The only problem is that's not the whole story. Realistically, these companies knew this day would come. It was just really important that they could pretend it wouldn't.
For a lot of people, they've decided it's time to cut back.
But legitimately, it might be time to cancel some subscriptions, and I'm probably gonna have to cancel some.
Some of them I'm not using, and it's just wasting money.
There's so many of these, it's hard to keep track.
At that point, that's an adversarial relationship. I don't want to pay people to enter adversarial relationships.
We aim, as I said, for this business to be a growth business for the company with margins that our shareholders will feel good about.
So what really made piracy go away and what's really bringing it back might sound simple, but there's actually a bit more going on. First and foremost, the majority of people actually would like to acquire their media legally as long as it was easy and not ridiculously expensive. Most reasonable people understand that it costs time and money to produce a song, film a movie, or develop a video game. And the people involved in these projects—
Yeah, I mean, with gaming, right? If you don't own the product that you're purchasing, if you're not purchasing a product, then what can I say?
Do need to be compensated, or else they are just not going to make them. Even people who frequent the high seas, so to speak, know this better than anybody else. A survey coming out of Australia at the peak of online piracy found that people who pirated content were actually more likely to pay for it if it was available. In a finding that really ages the study, online pirates were far more likely to pay for movies and music through—
Which is funny, by the way, because as I said, we still don't have a lot of things. Like, my country, as being known mostly for internet and hacking, you would think that they would bother to give us stuff. And yet they don't. Despite knowing that we would be willing to pay for it. Isn't that ironic?
iTunes or Quick Fix. This was because people who pirated content were just more likely to consume content overall, and most of them would only make the trip to the Bay if they couldn't find what they were looking for more legitimately. So there were two things that changed after 2013. Sure, there were a few high-profile crackdowns on some of these sites, But even the regulators themselves knew they were just playing a game of whack-a-mole. One of the most downloaded files on the Pirate Bay was the Pirate Bay, a complete copy of the site with all of the addresses that could be set up by basically anybody with some basic server hardware in the event that the authorities took down the original site. But then came along the streaming sites that, thanks to faster internet speeds, could let users watch content on demand without granting them direct access to digital files which could then be copied and shared illegally. The big thing was that these options were just so easy compared to piracy, and
that is very true. It is like convenience is a huge factor in why a lot of people wouldn't pirate, which is fair. Though I do argue that if you are not tech illiterate, it's still a lot easier to just set up your own like setup at home that where you can just throw everything and have it accessible by everything in your house. But yeah, I assume like another big issue is a lot of people are not used to computers anymore. They're used to consoles, they're used to tablets and phones. And because of that, the decline in knowledge is preventing a lot of people from actually setting things up for themselves to make their life easier in the long run, right? Like having a initial small hurdle of setting things up and then just having it available to you.
So cheap compared to buying songs or movies one by one that it just didn't really make sense to bother with anything else.
Understandable.
Nowadays, that's clearly changed. There are dozens of streaming services that are each getting more and more expensive every year. The movies and shows that you watch are being split up over different providers. The services themselves are getting worse by introducing ads and pushing less relevant content. And on top of all of that,
yeah, like the worst part was this one. Like Prime Video showing twice as many ads as it used to. Especially putting ads in your fucking streaming service. Like, you went from TV, where you had no control over ads, you went to like, these websites and you had no ads, and now they're putting ads back because you're on a low-paying option. You don't even have a free option on a lot of them. It's crazy.
It's just not that easy anymore. Even individual TV shows have certain seasons split up over different streaming services, and the first step in sitting down to watch a movie these days is to Google what streaming service has the 1984 release of Gremlins, and if you're unlucky...
Oh my god, that is so freaking true. I wanted to watch Uma Musume because the game released. So I was like, I want to watch it. And I'm like, okay, Crunchyroll has it from season 2. And I'm like, what the fuck? You don't have season 1? I legit just looked at it and I was like, huh?
What streaming service plus what VPN combo will get you the movie you want to watch? If you're already going through all that effort, it gets really tempting to just replace streaming services with your port of choice, because in most cases, it will just be easier. So yeah, streaming services were cheap and easy, which killed the need for piracy. But then they slowly became expensive and terrible, which brought it back. Pretty straightforward, right? Wrong. It's easy to write this whole thing off as just dumb companies being needlessly greedy to their own peril. And while that's definitely part of the problem,
I'm like, I'm not writing it off as just that, but it is a pretty big freaking part of it though. Like, they are being greedy.
There is a lot more to it than that. Music streaming by comparison is decent. There are multiple services, but almost all of them have almost all of the music that you would possibly be looking for.
God, I fucking hate Spotify. Small rant, but I tried Spotify without purchasing the subscription to it, and every minute or two I was like getting an ad for Spotify, and I'm like, I don't want to use your freaking thing. Like, that's just inconvenient.
As a result, nobody really bothers to pirate songs anymore, which is particularly impressive when you remember that just 15 years ago, 95% of music was being downloaded illegally. Artists have not been thrilled about the lower revenue they have got from streaming versus physical album sales, but most of them still go along with it because even a small share of something is better than most of their music being accessed for free. This raises a potentially unpopular idea, that it might not be streaming that's broken, it might be the movie industry that's broken. The golden age of streaming was never going to last because it was never meant to last. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why piracy is really making a comeback. This video was made possible by iScanner. I was sorting through some old
Sem
receipts for
também
tax
cable
season,
on
trying to
streaming.
remember which ones I still needed to
bad.
file. And of course, one of the important ones had coffee stains all over
Spotify
it.
is really
The
a
text was
without
barely
subscription.
readable.
I don't
Classic
recommend
me.
it.
That's why I started using iScanner. I just scanned the receipt and it used AI to clean everything up. It straightened the page, fixed the lighting, and even removed the worst of the stains. I could finally read the numbers again, and drop the PDF straight into my records. Since then, it's kind of become my go-to. Whenever I'm scanning documents, notes, receipts, or even something my dog got his teeth on, iScanner makes it super easy to salvage whatever's left and turn it into something useful. It's fast, it works across all my devices, and the free version actually does what I need, including editing, signatures, and storing everything in one place. Check it out with the link below, and make your paperwork just a little less painful. Netflix is the most dominant movie and TV streaming service in the world. It has over 300 million paying subscribers, and unlike a lot of its competitors, it's actually profitable. But from its very first days of online streaming, they knew they would eventually lose people back to piracy. They just really didn't care. And to see why, I'm sorry, but you are going to have to look at some financials. Last year, it made $8.7 billion in net income after taxes, which is extremely impressive. But it still makes it hard to justify the valuation of more than $500 billion. At that rate, shareholders would need 57 years for their investment to pay off, which is not a reasonable bet for a company in an industry that has only been dominant for a decade. 57 years ago, watching a movie looked like this. And in another 57 years from now, it's highly unlikely that we will still be watching movies through the current selection of streaming services. Now, most investors in this company aren't dumb. They know that Netflix can't make their money back with its current structure. What they are banking on is being able to offer a cheaper service that they can charge more for in order to fatten up those margins.
Let's not talk about my margins, by the way.
Let's
Being
not
nice
talk,
and fat. That's a nice shirt. Do they make it for men?
Anyway, cutting content, raising prices, and pushing strange features like mobile games within the app are not some surprise new rollout. They are part of a development.
I fucking hate the gaming aspect of Netflix, because like for some god-forsaken reason, my browser does not like it, or rather my monitor. Every time I turn on Netflix, my monitor goes black for 1 second. I hate it.
Plan that the company knew it would have to implement since it started offering online streaming. It would just be a lot better if they could do it without competition. Now, on the expenses side, there is some good news. As technology improves, network infrastructure has become cheaper for the same capacity, which means the actual cost to stream videos to users is getting better every year. Netflix's cost of revenue adjusted for inflation has actually been stable since 2022, despite adding almost 100 million new users in that time. Included in those costs are the aforementioned servers and network infrastructure, but it also includes the cost to license and produce their own movies, TV shows, and games. Another big reason their costs have been improving is because they just aren't licensing as much content as they used to, and that's for two reasons. The first was a business decision to cut down on a cost, especially for content that wasn't drawing in new users. The second reason is simply because they can't get their hands on as many titles anymore, because independent studios have made their own streaming services and want to keep their biggest IPs exclusive, so they can force users to either switch to their platform or shell out for 2 or more streaming services.
Not all Netflix originals are garbage. I've enjoyed quite a few of them. The problem is we have so many different freaking options right now that it makes it really difficult to like really stick with one, right? And it's inconvenient to just subscribe for a month and then unsubscribe and then like swap around and then change things and see who has it for how long and when it goes away and keep track of all of that. It's like a hassle.
Netflix is slowly producing its own titles, but that hasn't caught up to the content they are losing from licensing. So then why does this mean that Netflix doesn't care about piracy? Well, publicly they say they do, of course, but piracy is going to hurt their competition a lot more than it's going to hurt them. If people can't find a movie or show on Netflix and then give up and pirate it, that didn't really cost Netflix any money, because the vast majority of content out there wasn't theirs to lose, and they most likely didn't spend the money producing it. A 2023 paper in the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization titled Pirate and Chill found that when movies moved off Netflix to another platform, piracy of that content increased by more than 20%.
That's
now,
wild.
First and foremost, that's an amazing name for a professional journal article. But apart from that, it showed why Netflix hasn't been too concerned with online piracy.
That's wild.
In a now infamous quote from the company's chief content officer, they said that in order for Netflix to be successful, we need to become movie studios faster than movie studios can become us. Piracy
Oh my god. Netflix has become HBO faster than HBO can become us. That is wild as their goal, man. Insane. To be fair, they have successfully kind of replaced HBO, and they're doing a way better job than HBO Max is. I mean, I have HBO Max or whatever the heck it's called nowadays because of my internet subscription that gives it to me as part of the deal, but I don't think I ever went to look at anything there. Or maybe I did once. This is too much of a hassle.
Us. Piracy that disproportionately hurt legacy movie studios and their libraries of content was not something that Netflix would encourage. But behind closed doors, they certainly weren't too sad it was happening. Another way to think about this is that obviously Amazon isn't encouraging shoplifting, but it's a problem that hurts their competition far more than it hurts them. Piracy has also been a handy little tool throughout the company's history. Back in 2013, it admitted to using data from online piracy sites to find out what was popular and therefore what was worth licensing.
Yeah.
Okay, so Netflix doesn't care about the rise of piracy, but what about the actual Hollywood studios? Well, they obviously do, and they crack down on IP theft with furious anger. But they are in a difficult situation. They could send piracy back to the dark ages by reconcentrating their content onto a single easy platform. But at the moment, that would probably be Netflix, which a company like Disney would obviously not be willing to go along with after investing so much in their own service. If they keep competing though, they are just going to make the experience worse for everybody and probably lose more ground to the high seas.
To me, it's very weird that these companies don't just make like just one platform where they can share all the things. And based on who the movie is, they get like a split based on the views and stuff. Like it logistically, I know it's a nightmare. But Jesus Christ, the amount of greed where they want to be the top dog so that they have the brand recognition is
Now,
insane.
for these companies, this whole fight could not be happening at a worse time. There is a reason why music studios were able to play nice and make their content available just about anywhere while movie studios were fighting to the death. Music is simply much cheaper to produce, and there are far more sources of alternative revenue beyond just directly selling a song or an album. Artists don't make as much from streaming as they would from a physical album sale, but they can make it up in tours, merchandising, and other licensing deals. On the flip side, movies have largely been getting more expensive to produce, while cinema attendance has never fully recovered from its dip during COVID. Ironically, one of the biggest theater releases of the past 5 years was actually for a music.
Like, look at that dip, man. Though it makes sense, to be fair. It makes sense that a lot less people are willing to go for, like, to go to the cinema.
Music studio with the cinema release of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. In the past, poor box offices wouldn't matter as much, because mid-budget movies could make a lot of their money back through DVD sales. But obviously, that's not really a thing anymore. So studios have put even more effort into pushing their streaming services to eventually make back the difference. It's a bold strategy, and there are hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap at stake. So executives really want to pretend that eventually it'll work out. But if it doesn't, there are some lessons to be learned from the music industry which didn't beat piracy. It just made it unnecessary. The first is that movies have simply become too expensive for the current market. Studios have recognized that people are only going to the movies for special occasion releases these days because it's expensive, the theater experience isn't that good anymore, and people can just wait a month and watch it for free on one of the streaming services that they were already paying for. Instead of making the whole thing cheaper and putting less of their eggs in a single basket, they have doubled down on producing mega blockbusters. Of the 20 most expensive movies ever made, 19 of them came out in the last 10 years after streaming was already mainstream. These figures also only count the production budget, not the marketing budget. And on the revenue side, the box office doesn't include the share paid out to movie theaters. With even extremely generous estimates of those arrangements, only about half of these releases made their money back. And some in particular, like the Marvel's Snow White, Dial of Destiny, and the latest Mission Impossible movie, are shaping up to be catastrophic losses. So far, studios have been able to justify these flagship productions to their investors by talking about their IP value, which can later be extracted by bringing in customers to their streaming platforms. But that isn't really happening. Customers who join because they want to watch a single movie didn't.
About that, I feel like looking at it from the perspective of someone that maybe doesn't care about IPs as much, they're running those IPs into the ground. How are they supposed to like make them profitable when they ruin the IP? Like, it's not that movies aren't good, it's they don't put the same effort into their movies. They don't bother. And They said it themselves. It's easier to just freaking remaster or remake something rather than go from scratch. It's easier, it's cheaper, they don't have to think much. Yeah, they're like really bad quality. I don't know why they are investing so much into the movies when they're really bad.
Tend to stay subscribed for very long compared to those who enjoy a deeper library of mid-budget movies or TV shows. I don't know about you, but I tend to take my subscription to whatever streaming service is hosting The Office this month. These huge productions also put more strain on the business.
I mean, can you blame him? The Office is pretty cool.
As these losses have to be made up somewhere, and that is more often than not increased prices, more ads, and worse overall service. Now, I would forgive you for not feeling too sorry for Hollywood studio executives, but they are really in a no-win situation here. The harder they push back against the changing media landscape, the harder they push people towards the high seas. So anyway,
let me put out a wild idea. They could not push back. They could, like, change. It's a wild concept, I know. It's very wild, but how about you change and adapt?
Now might be a good time to shamelessly plug that these videos are being made available ad-free on Spotify. So if you would prefer to listen in or watch it over there, I have left a link in the description. And if you think it's just streaming services that have been getting so bad, go and watch this video next to find out why making junk makes so much money. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
This entire discussion can be TLDR in companies greedy, unwilling to change, doubling down on shit, inconvenient for customers, so customers are finally going back to the yo-ho-ho days of things. Like, bro, it's mostly greed. It's mostly the unwillingness to change and to think about something that would make it nice. Like, the entire point of the streaming service was the fact that we weren't getting ads. Like, everything is going up in cost. The movies are going up in cost, and people are like, why? Why? Like, the shitty half-done movies that are mid-budget, that are with heart and soul, tend to be a lot more enjoyable than some of the big shit that we've been getting lately. And I'll be honest, I'm one of the people that has been enjoying her weird Christmassy themed Holly slop shows, movies, because they're just cheery and cheap and nice, and they all follow the same plot. Like, not everything needs to be a blockbuster, not everything needs to be insanely cool or insanely high value. And ironically, anime has been picking up so freaking hard. Like, Netflix reported that anime is gaining so much popularity, and over 50% of its user base is now watching anime. It's like, wow, what a shocker. What a shocker. People actually want to watch it and enjoy. Anyway, YouTube, what are your thoughts on this?